Hello and welcome to the Delphi Training Series brought to you by 3dbuzz.com. I'm Buzz.
And I'm Logan.
And this is episode number 2, and we are going to pick up where we left off last night. It's really cool that we're coming back to you guys so quick with yet another free training video over Delphi. And as we said yesterday, this training series is aimed at those that are completely new to the world of programming and are interested in getting up to speed with Delphi using the language object Pascal. So yeah, now yesterday, if you guys recall, what we did is we showed you how to go about getting Turbo Delphi, getting it installed on your computer, going over and getting it registered and all, so everything works. We also downloaded the hotfix rollup. Remember that?
Yeah, we actually grabbed it off the page. We've got it on the hard drive now.
But we didn't install it. That was not good because we meant to do that live on camera. That's right. So right now we are looking at the cute little application we wrote yesterday, the ever so exciting Hello World, and we're about to say goodbye to it. Let's go ahead and close Delphi down for just a minute. And if you guys did not do this yesterday, you need to do it now. We're going to go ahead and open up our setup folder here, and there's the turbo_hotfix rollup.zip file. Let's go ahead and extract that. And here it comes. All right, and there is the executable inside, a nice little README if you're interested in reading it. Let's go ahead and run the executable. And we, of course, agree to the license, which means we've just sold our house to them. No. All right, so we'll go ahead and run through. And, of course, for us, it installed quickly because, well, to be honest with you, we installed this a little earlier today. But if you follow these steps, everything should work beautiful. You are now patched and in sync with us. So let's go ahead and hit Finished. And now let's launch Delphi. And here she comes. And when it gets up, Logan, go ahead and open up our project that we saved out yesterday. Go ahead and maximize that. There you go. Now, we showed them how to save projects, but we didn't talk about how to open projects. So let's go ahead and do that real quick.
Well, I'm a big fan of the Toolbar button, much faster access. So there we've got our Open button.
Of course, there's a File Open project up underneath the File button, as we all know, the menu at the top.
And we can see that Delphi is sitting at its projects folder.
Okay. Within
that, we've got our Hello World folder.
Simple enough.
Within there, we have a few files that we can see. We have a BDS proj file and a DPR file.
Okay. Now, those people coming from older versions of Delphi that may have played with it in the past, are going to be very familiar with the DPR file, right?
That's right. That's the old classic project file.
But now we've got this new BDS proj. Aha. A little more involved, eh?
Yeah, it can get a little bit more involved. I guess for the sake of keeping things simple tonight,
it's our project that encompasses all files within.
Right. With more recent versions of Delphi, a BDS proj will encompass everything. Therefore, that's exactly what we want to open when we're opening any particular project.
Sounds fair. Let's open it. All right. So there we are looking at a little bit of source code. Let's go ahead and jump over to the form so that they can see that. All right. So there's the visual side and the code side. Now, as we're getting ready to dive into some more interesting content for tonight, I think it would be fair if we start out with some sort of simple trip around the user interface. Talk about the major areas that we're looking at right now. Now, obviously, we're not going to get into talking about every single button right now and the functionality of every option that's available up under some of these different windows and all because, well, number one, it would take forever. Number two, you would know the Delphi IDE inside out when we were done. Number three, no, I'm just not going to do it because you guys aren't going to understand a lot of this stuff if you are truly new to programming. So starting out with the user interface, you've always got to have a menu bar at the top, right?
Well, always. I mean, that's a standard, a staple of Windows applications.
It really is. Or it just wouldn't feel like a Windows application if it didn't have one. And up under here, you're going to find, common things that you find with most applications out there. The ability to create new projects, open projects, reopen things that have recently been open, save as, etc., right? From there, we're going to go ahead and move on over to Edit, where you'll find your undo and redo, and then things like cut, copy, paste, delete, selecting. Some neat things down here that we're going to be using when we start aligning to grid, bringing to front, and sending to back. This is when we start dealing with our visual controls over here while developing the look of our application. The ability to align, size, scale, controlling the order of when you hit the tab button, from what control to what control will focus go, etc., etc. So all sorts of stuff. We're going to be looking at all of these things as we advance through our free training videos over Delphi. Over here on search, of course, the ability to jump into code and, find stuff, replace stuff, search again, etc. We'll get over here to view, and now now we have the ability to open up a lot of these tool dialogues that you see open right now in case they get closed, along with a lot of other things. And again, we'll get to these as we start diving deeper and deeper into the series. And then from there, as we just move over, we've got a series of menu options that provide you with access to tools and various dialogues that help in the creation of a Windows-based application or a non-Windows-based application, depending on what type of program or DLL or whatever it is that you're writing. And then from there, we get over here into some layout stuff, which we'll talk about more in just a minute. That's the menu bar. Up underneath the menu bar, you guys have already seen how Logan works. It's got to be quick, right? So obviously not the menu bar. What am I saying? The toolbar. Yeah, it's what happens when we record early in the morning. The toolbar is going to give you access to items that are generally selected often in your menu bar. It only makes sense. I mean, the ability to create new stuff, open stuff, save stuff, etc. So you're going to find Logan using the toolbar often. As we first get started with this training series, Logan will take the time to show you which thing he's hitting and in what hotkey he's using, if he's a fan of a particular hotkey at that moment. Anyways, as we dive deeper and deeper, we're going to get away from holding your hand as we come up here to both the menu and the toolbar. Now from there, we're looking at the desktop. All right. So the whole desktop, that's kind of how we've laid our workspace out. Ooh, I used a fancy word, workspace. That is exactly what everything from right up underneath the toolbar all the way down here to the bottom is considered. This is all our workspace. And right now our workspace is very active. We've got stuff everywhere. What we're looking at really is just 1, 2, 3, 4 main tool dialogues, if you will. And then what I generally refer to the workspace right here, even though it's the whole thing. Here we're looking at our visual design side of things, if you will, and our code. Okay, so down here at the bottom you can see we've got code, which we'll talk more about that in a second. We've got history, which we'll get into that in a minute. And then if I come over here real quick, we can go ahead and jump down here and open up our form. There, now we can go to between design and code. So you can see how we're switching back and forth there. We can switch back and forth up there. Okay, so what are some of these dialogues located on the sides? Let's start over here. This is our project manager. Logan, what will we find in the project manager?
We'll find all files and assets that make up our project.
Simple
all
enough.
The things that are built together to make our final program.
So already we're dealing with more than just one file for this very simple Hello World application that we wrote, correct?
That's right. We've got a Pascal unit which has our source code, and we have a form which holds the visual side of our program.
All right, very cool. And we'll be looking at the guts of all that stuff a little bit later on because it's really cool. All right, so as we start adding more and more files into our project, and of course more and more forms, it'll be very easy to navigate between all of our different assets or resources, if you will, for the project over here.
Right, especially since you don't have to have everything that comprises a project open at the same time.
Right.
As things get more complicated and more cluttered, you can close individual things that you're not worried about at the moment.
Oh, so close something out.
So let's say right now we don't need to see the main unit anymore. We're working on something else.
And then, oh gosh, it's been closed and I'm going to panic because I have seen people in the past panic when working with Delphi and they close something out. And what do? They save the whole thing, they close it, open it back up. No, you don't have to do that.
No, and it's because it's not gone. All that's happened is it's been closed from the main workspace.
Yeah, it's been cleaned up.
Our project is still open in its entirety. That means all we have to do is come back to the project manager and we can reload our main source file. Okay, simple. All
right, so that's the project manager. Now let's go down up underneath it to the tool palette. Ooh, now the tool palette is going to give us access to, let's just say components. All the components we could possibly need for developing an application. For the visual design side of things, you'll notice that when we are looking at our form right now, we're in the design mode. And the type of components that we have available over here are components for design, if you will. Like the other day, yesterday as a matter of fact, Logan showed you how to create a button. He just came down here to T button, clicked on it, and drag the T button on the screen. It's as simple as that. Let's go ahead and delete that. So it's just a series of components, and we're going to talk more about components in just a minute. But this is context sensitive, right, Logan?
That's right. The tool palette itself will show different items depending on what you're looking at in your main workspace.
So I switch over here to code. So now I'm working with the good old, programming code, if you will. And look at this. Everything's changed. Where's T button? You're not going to drop a T button down over here in code, okay? That's for visual side. So again, you'll notice that everything over here changes, so depending on what you're in. So we go back to design, watch how this changes. Bink, it's changed.
So now we're back into visual components.
And again, we're going to be getting into all that as we dive deeper and deeper. I know you guys get tired of me saying that, but I mean, that's the truth. So from there, let's go ahead and jump all the way over here to Object Inspector. All right, object-oriented language. Everything we deal with inside of Delphi is an object. This form is an object. This button is an object. And anything else that we were to lay down in here would be an object. Objects have names. That's the first thing you must understand. What is the name of this button? Well, let's just look over here in the Object Inspector, and the name is Button 1. Let's click on our form. The form is now selected, and with it having the focus, look at this. Form 1 is what is in the Object Inspector now. So all of its properties and events were loaded into the Object Inspector. Simple enough. Now, does that make sense?
Yes, it keeps up with what you've selected. So every time you select something, it'll immediately refresh itself, so that way you can see everything relevant to what you're working on.
Exactly. Now let's go ahead and do something like change the name. So we've got Click Me over here for this button. How do we change its name? All we need to do is just simply scroll down over here to the miscellaneous section in the properties for the object we want to change the name of. Now we can come down here to name, and let's say I want to call this OK. Yeah, good enough. So the name now is OK, and you'll see right here that it's reflected in the Object Inspector. So that's what we have selected. So now if we were to come over here to, remember, the Tool Palette and grab a T button, drag out another button like such. Now let's give this guy a name. Look at that. By default, given Button 1. Let's call this button something like Close. These are awful names, by the way. We'll talk about naming conventions later. But you'll notice that this button is called Close. This button is called OK. Check this out. Remember how yesterday Logan wrote Click Me on this button by changing the property all the way back up here? Caption. So he typed in Click Me. We haven't set a caption for this button, so what it does is it shows you the name of that particular object on the button. When a second ago you guys saw that, as you rewind your video just a little bit, you'll see that it said Button 1, and we just changed the name of that object to Close. Now what's the name of our form again? Form 1. So you guys got the idea. As you go through here and you click, on here, let me not double click. As you click on your different objects, it's a single left click, you will notice that with it selected, that particular object is loaded in the Object Inspector and gives you access to all of its properties. And we're going to start diving into a lot of these properties actually in just a few minutes. Now, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and bring our attention up here to the last dialogue I want to talk about at the moment, and that's the structured dialogue. Now, the structured dialogue, it's going to show us, well, it really depends on what mode we're in, doesn't it, Logan?
Yes, it does. It has two main modes of operation. Really, it's just another context-sensitive dialogue, much in the way that the tool palette was.
Okay.
If you're looking at design elements, what it's going to do is try to show you objects that you've created in that for that design element, for things that are in that unit, design-wise.
But it's going to show it to you in a hierarchical fashion, which we'll give them a quick example of in just a second. But now, if you were looking at code, let's go and switch over to the code mode. Ooh, look at that. So now we've got classes, variables, constants, uses.
So everything relevant to coding.
Very nice. And this is really important because as we start writing tons and tons of code, this will allow us to gain access quickly to particular areas within the code.
Right. Times when we need to jump around, say things start getting a bit long-winded in what we have to do, and we want to jump around to different objects we've created, all in code.
Precisely.
It's just a quick way of keeping everything organized, keeping tabs on what you're doing.
Exactly. And over here in design mode, same thing. As our form on the visual side becomes more and more complex as we add more buttons and option buttons and panels and check boxes, etc. What happens is, it gets cluttered with a lot of stuff, and then selecting things might be difficult. If you come over here and use your structure dialog, selecting those objects are very simple. You guys saw a second ago, I can simply click, 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 and that is selecting those objects. And you'll notice as I'm clicking, that object becomes highlighted over here. Well, let's pretend I had 100 different objects and I needed to find one quickly. And let's say it was an object that was actually hidden where you couldn't see it over here. And that's a trick we'll do from time to time. One that may end up kind of off the screen on the side. Well, you can come over here and check this out. By clicking on it, well, here I go again, double clicking a little bit too fast. So yeah, be careful with double clicking. Going to take you into the code side, guys. So as I click, it's loading up that particular object down here in the Object Inspector because it indeed selects it. Okay, so again, it becomes very easy. Now, I said a second ago that this shows a hierarchical representation of your form. So right now we've got the form. That's our parent, highest level, right? We've got two children in form. So parent, child, child. Simple enough. If I move one of these children around, it has no effect on the other child. But check this out. Let's do something that really demonstrates the hierarchical fashion of how this all works. I'm going to come over here to my tool palette, and let's see, where do I want? T-panel. That'll work great. So I'm going to grab and drag out a T-panel, which can be used for 1,000,001 different things. One of the things I love to use them for is just graphical prettiness for the dialogue, if you will. Graphical prettiness, that was awful. Let's go ahead and delete the caption out so there's nothing there. Now, check it out. It is a child. Same ranking, if you will, as the OK and close buttons. But now let's create another button. But watch this. I'm going to select T button over here, and I'm going to draw this button out on my panel. Bink. Hoo-hoo. Interesting. Button 1 just became a child of panel 1, which is a child of form 1. So form 1 is now the grandfather of button 1, correct?
Exactly.
And check this out. How cool is this? If I go to move button 1 around now, right? Look at that. It's actually being held within its parent. That means that if I select the parent and move the parent, I move the children, its children, with it. Okay? So, and trust me, guys, this is going to become very important and very useful in the future as we get into designing more complex forms. Now, something very important to point out here. Let's say that I wanted, this is really cool. I want to put these buttons over here in this. So maybe I'll come and change the size of this a little bit and push it up here. And I want this guy down here. Let's drag him down. All right, so about like that.
Oops. And,
wow, we have a very interesting problem right now. We kind of need to bring this guy to the front, don't we?
Right, and because of the creation order, it was created before the panel was. So when it goes to try to draw things that are on the same level, like the panel 1 and the OK button are still on the same level, hierarchically speaking. But the panel was created after it, and therefore it is drawn on top of the button.
Okay, do we know how we can bring this to the front?
Without changing the hierarchy?
Without changing?
Or with changing the hierarchy.
Okay, never mind. I know how to do it. I'm going to,
because, that's an interesting term to... Because, there we have...
bring the front. Da-da-da. Okay, I was trying to give the big clue. Bring the front. That's what I want. Bring the front. So there it is, at the front. So, cool. Rock on. We're all set up, right? So let's grab our parent and move... Wait, where'd it go?
No,
it's not working. That's because even though I've pulled Click Me Down, which is the button named OK, it is still a child of Form 1. It's at the same level as Panel 1. It does not belong to Panel 1. Now, you guys saw that I can create the object on top of the other object to make it a child. I also have the ability to simply grab the left mouse button, and while holding the mouse button down, I can simply drag down here to panel 1, let go. Now, let's just reposition. Bink. Check it out. Child of this parent. I move this parent around, I now have the whole team coming with me. So I can grab this guy, same thing. I can simply drag, drop, bingo, and then let's just kind of pretty it up a little bit. And we'll make the panel here a little bit bigger because I'm just being picky. And it's still not perfect, but that works. And we'll move this up here. And we'll come down here somewhere, and we'll move this up here, and then we'll run our little program, and ooh, look at that. How cool is that? Click me. We still get the dialogue, and these guys don't do anything because we didn't tell them to do anything. Close. So there you go. Now we've actually exposed you guys to several things. We've exposed you to the layout, if you will, the default layout. We've seen the menu bar, we've seen the toolbar, and then we've taken a look at our workspace to see the default dialogues that are available for us, starting over here with our project manager, walking down here to the tool palette over there. We jump to the over here to the object inspector, and then finally up here to the structured dialogue. And we've been working hand in hand with various objects, seeing how that affects our structured dialogue and the object inspector. So, pretty good, right? Everything starting to make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Let's take just a second now and see if we can just real quickly just goof up just a little bit the layout here. Our
right,
desktop.
just to show what happens when you start to mess with the desktop and the individual tool dialogues.
Exactly. I mean, the bottom line is those people watching may not like to work with, this particular layout. Maybe they want it to look more like, other IDEs out there. So give me an example.
All right. I'm going to start with a really simple example. I'm sure everyone who's as curious as I am are going to see the X buttons and go, I know it's going to close something, but I've just got to see what it does.
Okay.
I just have to see what it does.
Hup,
okay, yay, I saw, wait. But,
where'd it go?
But I needed that.
I did.
I wanted it.
I did.
All right, so first thing I'll show in regards to the desktop is, well, we just got rid of an item off the desktop. How do we bring it back?
Okay.
So this will briefly review the view menu.
Okay.
Inside of view, we have all the different things that we can see on the desktop.
Okay.
So one of those things should be the object inspector. And there it is.
Oh, very nice.
Object inspector.
So go ahead and close that and hit F11 because I saw that was a hotkey.
So, okay, getting into the world of hotkeys, quickly bring the object inspector back. We'll hit the F1 key.
He means F11.
F11. it has a 1.
F1 will give you help.
Maybe an extra 1.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to throw that down. Logan, we're going to talk about help, too, before it's all over with, because it's so useful. All right, so very cool. So F11, if you hit F11 again, what does it do?
F11, it keeps bringing it back. It'll switch around a little bit in the within the desktop itself. That is a good point, though. It isn't a toggle.
Right.
It will show it. It won't get rid of it.
Gotcha. Okay. Just making sure everything out there is well known. So now, all right, let's see if you can make this look a little bit like some other application.
All right.
Other IDE, if you will.
Let's take a look at other ways we can mess around with these individual windows. The top gray area counts as a title bar. And much like any other window, that means we can drag stuff.
So you can make it undocked.
Right. As a matter of fact, everything we've seen on the screen right now has been docked thus far.
So if you had dual monitors, like we do, how convenient, eh?
Yep. It's convenient, gives you a lot of extra desktop space. But let's say we wanted to move things off onto that monitor. The way the monitors are set up right now, everything is docked into the main window, which is linked to only the one monitor.
Right.
So what I've done here is I've just started to drag the object inspector, and it's giving me a representation of what that window would look like if I were to let go of the mouse.
Okay.
So as we can see here, we have a big area drawn in the middle of the form, or in the middle of the window, excuse me.
So if you let go,
there's the actual window. And now it is behaving a lot more like you would classically associate with the window. So there's resizing, there's dragging, and we've got the object inspector as its own floating window.
Okay.
And I know you can't see the other monitor, but I can, and I can see
and
that.
And it's on the other monitor now.
So we've just freed up a bunch of real estate space within the main window.
And he's dragging it back. Cool.
All right. Now, let's see, what else can we do? We've seen that as we drag this around, it will show you a representation of how it's trying to dock.
Notice there's 15,000 places it's wanting to dock.
So let's do some interesting stuff and just mess with the whole workspace.
Just a couple
here.
things, yeah.
So let's say we don't need structure for the moment.
Okay.
Let's take our tool palette and rip it off of this side. Instead, link it over to the left.
Okay.
Now let's take a look at this little push pin icon. What this guy does is causes one of these dialogues to collapse itself onto the side.
Okay.
And if we were to mouse over it, it'll act like a rollout, showing us only things as we need them, and we can let it collapse back. So now the IDE is starting to take on a look of another popular IDE.
Very nice. Now let's just leave it right there. Now, can you take that object inspector and take it over to the left-hand side too?
It'll probably stack up just like that.
So very sweet. You didn't know that, did you?
So yeah,
it's handy because you got it's basically like a toolbar running down the left-hand side, and you just move your mouse over, grab what you need. I think it's cool. Okay, so now we have this new layout. So can we save this layout?
We can. If we go back up to the top, we have a button specifically for saving a desktop, saving your current layout.
Okay.
If we click that, it'll come up with a dialog asking us to name our
Logan's desktop.
So we shall do just that. We'll call this Logan's desktop. Like so. Press OK. And now, within the drop-down list of all available desktops, we have Logan's desktop.
Awesome. So now we can go back to our default desktop, which is what we're going to do.
Right. Well, that's one of the things built in is the default layout. So if we click that, everything's back to the way it was. So if you've just gotten done with a good playing around session, you've completely closed or changed everything, but now it's time to get back to work, and you kind of like the way it was. Default layout's always there for you.
Simple enough. Let's go ahead and maximize Delphi again. All right, very cool. Whew. So there is a quick, not so quick, but kind of quick trip around the user interface. Now, we're about to start getting into a little bit more code again. And there's something that I'm going to really start beating into all of our viewers' heads, Logan. And that is we are dealing with an object-oriented language, which comes with all sorts of really cool terms when we start talking about encapsulation and inheritance and all that stuff, which we'll get to later. We don't want to blow anybody's mind right now, but what I do want to do is start with something real simple. Start talking about an object. What is an object? Well, at this point, they've been working with objects already. They've been playing with objects. Every time we drop a button down on that window, that's an object, right?
That's right. Everything's an object.
The panel I dropped down, that guy, let me reach all the way over here and grab that mouse from you.
So visual aid here.
Yeah, so object, 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 and over here, object. Now check this out. The tool palette. What really are these components? Well, we know they're objects, right? But it's not an object. In other words, if I come over here and I say click on T button and drag it over here, I'm not taking a T button off of this and putting it over here. This really is a template for the creation of a button. Well, you buy that?
Right. It represents things that can be created. Just the fact that button is sitting there over on the tool palette doesn't mean one copy of a button is sitting in space somewhere.
That's right.
It's just saying that if you wanted to make a button, you could make one that was of this type.
That's right. So I'm going to say I'm going to make an object of this type. So I select it, come up here, and when I start creating, I am now creating a true object. Basically an object that it's an instance of that particular, in this case right here, a T button, instance of this object, this template, if you will. I'm trying to be careful with words, but these words are really going to come full circle here in the near future when we start getting into the whole object-oriented part and we start getting into that as far as the coding aspect goes. So right now, while this is not a true object, it is a template for a T button, and when I came up here and drug it out after selecting it here, I created the true object. Now, let's go ahead and jump over to the real world for a second. Let's pretend we made a manufacturing plant, and this manufacturing plant is going to create human beings. Ooh, that's a scary plant, and I think there's been several movies made out of topics like that. But in this plant, we have two different templates that exist. We have the human male template, and we have the human female template. Okay? And technically, these two templates could be derived from just a human template. But that's getting a little too sophisticated. We'll get into that a little bit later. So let's just start with something simple. We've got the male template and the female template. So just like we had this over here, pretend that our tool palette here is kind of like our factory, right? And so we'll go ahead and delete this button and create something new over here.
Right.
I'll create a T memo. This is our male human template. So we want to make one of those in this factory. And I come over here and I drag the male human out. Okay? Now we have truly, in our factory, we've truly created a male human. This is a real human now. It's an object. It really exists. If you think about it, you, the viewer who's watching this right now, you are indeed an object in the world we live in. Logan's an object. I'm an object. Your monitor's an object. So there's different types of objects in the world. So far, so good, Logan?
Right, and just to reinforce one point you had said, looking at the tool palette as a factory versus one of the objects it produces is a good way to look at that. You can look at the human factory, and it doesn't necessarily represent any specific human. All it represents is the ability to create a human.
Right, the blueprints.
Right, it's when you go to that factory and you ask for a human, that's when you get an actual human object out of that factory.
Exactly. Now, in this particular case with Memo 1, I've created a human. Ta-da! It's as simple as that. Now that I've got a human, I can go about setting properties. Again, thinking about ourselves as objects, we have properties, don't we, Logan? We have a height, we have a weight, we have an eye color, hair color, even if we have hair, maybe we don't have hair, etc., etc. So we have properties, and you guys have already seen that when you select objects inside of Delphi, over here in the Object Inspector, it loads all of the properties associated with that particular object. So if this was truly a male human, over here we would see things like weight, height, hair color, etc. In this particular case, we're seeing things like, how are we going to align this? How are we going to align the margins within? How are we going to anchor it, constrain it? The height, if we come in here right now, the height is 49, the width, height and width. There we go. Width is 121. I want the width to be 180, and hit enter, and what do you know? It is now wider. So if we had a male human and we went in there and we said, change the hair from blonde to brown, the hair color would change. Properties are going to become so important to you guys. I mean, it helps define that object's true individuality, if you will. Okay? I know I'm reaching a little far here, but it does work. Now, we've created this human, and we've talked about adjusting its properties. It also comes with some nifty features, too. Think about it. When a human male is created, it needs to have the ability to respond to events. How convenient. There's an events right here. Well, what kind of events would a human male or a human in general, human male or human female, respond to? Events like being scared. What are they going to do when they're scared? What are they going to do when they're happy? What are they going to do when they're hungry? Okay? The same thing applies here with this object button. Let's go down here to Click Me. Click Me has a bunch of different events. On click. You'll notice that you have on with all of these different events. You're going to become very comfortable seeing the word on often. So on click means when this button is clicked, what are we going to do? And I can come over here and just simply come down here and double click on this and check it out. When this button is clicked, okay, this is what's going to happen. And that's the code that we coded in yesterday. Simple enough. Now, what kind of events would a human have? Well, as we said, scare, happy. Let's change that terminology. We would have things like on scare, on happy, on hungry. And when those things take place, what will happen internally? Well, that's up to the programmer to put that in there, okay? Because again, each object has its own functionality, event handling, properties. When I get hungry, I hunt food. When Logan gets hungry, Logan goes, I'll deal with it later. There's a big difference there. We're programmed differently.
Or you could have two different humans. One's response to on scare could be to run away.
Right.
Another one's response to on scare could be to fight.
Exactly. Beautiful. And then there's another thing. So we've got properties, we've got events, and the other thing that you guys are going to become comfortable dealing with, we've got methods, which breaks down into procedures and functions, which we'll talk more about that later. But a method, what is that? It is some sort of functionality that the object has by default. What kind of functionality would a human, male or female, have by default? Well, the ability to walk.
They could walk, they could run, they could sleep.
Exactly. And this is going to be things you guys are going to be working with. We're going to be putting our own objects in. Now, you'll notice we don't see the functionality right here. We see properties and we see events. We start getting into code, and we're going to start dealing with functionality. Now, there's functionality that's already there with a lot of these objects that exist higher up in the hierarchy. And you might be thinking, higher up in the hierarchy? What are you talking about? And that's something we'll talk about a little bit later. But, all right, no, we're going to talk about it now. I'm going to give a real quick example. Remember how I said we had two sets of blueprints? We had the human male and we had the human female. Why would you want to recreate the walk functionality in both of those? That kind of be a waste of time.
Right, it would do the same thing in both.
So how about we have a master set of blueprints called the human, right? It's kind of our base class, if you will. And it defines things like, one, the generic shape, the fact that we're a biped, okay? It defines functionality, like the ability to walk and eat, etc. Now, from those master blueprints, we can derive a new set of blueprints, the human male, and another set of blueprints, the human female. And those two sets of blueprints inherited from our base class, our master class, if you will, the human. Does that make sense, Logan?
Right, and it's a division so that you organize things and you don't have to do the same thing over and over again.
Precisely.
You take anything that is the same between classes and you put those in a master class, like walk. Walk could go in the base human, and then both the male and female humans will automatically have walk functionality.
That's right, they'll inherit it. How awesome is that? Then they have the ability to override it and add to it, and wow, all sorts of cool stuff. But now we're really starting to get into the object-oriented world. So let's scale back just a second and try to keep this as simple as we possibly can. Done. That's it. We know what objects are now. We know that everything that we drop down is going to be an object. Let's go ahead and bring this back up. So objects, objects, objects. As we select our objects over here, we can inspect all of its properties, all of its events, and later on we're going to start dealing with its methods. We're going to start writing our own functions and procedures so that we add functionality into these objects. All right, simple enough. Woo, now that we've gone through all of that and I have been just talking like crazy, let's go ahead and let's see, what can we do? Let's make a program. Let's start out with, let me think. Let's do something simple. How about, want to do just a new application?
Yeah, completely new, and start taking a look at some examples of the clean slate.
Okay, so file new.
And I'll go down to other. See, check this out. This is a quick thing to point out. That icon with the new is the same as that button, so we should get the same thing. And there we go. Okay,
Logan's just saying, in the future, I'm using the button.
Precisely.
So a new VCL Forms application. Let's do it. We don't need to save all that. All right, so here we go. Clean slate, starting fresh, new Windows application. Let's make a program that will allow the user to take some text in.
Okay.
And then I want there to be a button. And I want it to, when the user hits that button, I want it to output that information in 3 different ways. I want it to output all lowercase. So if I type in Logan and I type it all caps, or if I type it with a capital L and a capital O because I'm so cool, I'm neat. I hit the button, I want it to show it all lowercase in one text field. In another text field, I want to show it all uppercase. And in another text field, I want to reverse it. I want to show it backwards. I know, guys, this is really simple stuff, but I want to build simple applications at first. So let's go ahead and lay out some... All
right, well, the first thing we'll need to do is to be able to take in input. Okay. And we were talking about text input, so we'll use edits to allow us to type whatever we want into the program.
Okay.
So we'll start off by creating 3 of those.
All right.
Actually, we're going to need
4.
Let's see, 4, because we have 1 for input, 3 for output.
Now let's take a second and throw some labels beside each of those so that we know what we're looking at.
Matter of fact, there. I'll leave this one a little bit farther down than the others.
Okay, because it's special.
So drag.
So now he's putting another component out there. Now, remember I said earlier about components. They kind of break down into 2 categories. When we were looking at the tool palette, I said I was going to come back to components for just a minute. We've got visual components and non-visual components. A non-visual component, an example, a timer, you're not going to see it. Actually, no, you do see it, so it's probably still going to be a control.
I mean, well, see, it depends on what you're looking at. If you're in design versus when the program is running, non-visual components will, of course, not be seen when the program is running.
Right.
A timer doesn't mean you're going to be looking at a little clock or anything.
Exactly. So it's going to be a non-visual component. Exactly. So you'll see it when you drop it down. Okay, good enough.
I mean, if you couldn't see it when you drop it down, that would be really hard to manage as far as the component goes.
No, and you just use your structure dialog on the left-hand side.
That's true. You
could. Select it from there. But okay, so anyways, visual and non-visual. Right now, all of the components that Logan is putting down are visual components. When we run the application, you're going to see these. With them being visual components, they have another name that they're commonly called, and that is controls. So you will hear that name used a lot in Delphi programming and Visual Basic programming and other languages out there. So Logan is currently placing controls on the form.
So for this label control we've just dropped down, I'm going to go over to its properties so that I can change the caption.
Okay, and put the call it input text, and then put a colon. Okay. Now let's make a few more of those.
Move that over and
just do a Control-C, Control-V. Show them you can do that. So Control-C, Control-V. Ooh, look at that. What Logan's doing is copying and pasting. So that's right. You can indeed copy and paste controls.
So just taking the time to align these a little bit. We might even need to get into a little bit of more accurate aligning. Because
you want to show them how to do the nudging stuff?
So yeah, this we'll go ahead and introduce nudging. You can see because of the grid settings we have now, it's either going to the very top of this edit or to the very bottom of the edit. And I want to try to center it up.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is hold Control and then tap the arrow keys. And as I do that, I move it on a pixel-by-pixel basis.
Nice.
And even as we're nudging, though, Delphi is still nice enough to highlight when we're aligning different pieces within each of these controls. So we can see right now that the text of our label is lined up with the text of our edit.
Very nice.
So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through one by one and make sure that they all line up.
Okay.
So the top one already was. Hold Control and...
So again, Control and up and down with the arrow keys.
And, well, that should do it.
All right, very cool. All right, so let's go ahead and change the text in our final 3 label controls. So call that lowercase. Lowercase, yeah, that's good enough. Colon.
I didn't, yeah, I must have erased that.
And then let's do the next one is uppercase, colon. And let's do the last one as a reverse. Reverse text, colon.
So looking at this, I need to align these a little bit differently. Leave the input as the one that stands alone, because each of these, lowercase, uppercase, and reverse text are all outputs.
So now watch this. Logan's going to grab 2 at the same time. He's going
Matter of fact, I'm going to grab 4.
Oh, look at you go. I was just going to say grab reverse text and its edit box, move them up to a line, and then grab all of that and move it down.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. Now, there's a few ways you can go about selecting multiple things, but I'm just going to use the selected highlight.
Okay. So just marquee select, up one, let go, done.
And then select all of these. And now we have everything, so we can move it down. Or did you want to move?
I was thinking moving the bottom, yeah, and then just moving them down 1.
I'm with you now.
Okay. Now let's grab a button, because we need to add some functionality in here. And drag a button out down there. And let me see it. We'll pretty this up just a little bit.
Okay.
Actually, we'll do this. We'll Control-C, Control-V, and we'll move this guy. So right there, let's take this guy and move him over. And now we can clean this up just a little bit, maybe something like that. That looks good. And now let's go ahead and change the caption on that one to close. And let's change the caption on the other one to process. As you guys may figure out, I'm trying to slip one more cool thing in on you, or just one more interesting thing. All right, now, when you run the program, let's go ahead and run it. All right, so there she is. And I see edit. Edit 1, edit 2, edit 3, edit 4. It's using the name of those objects as the default text that's being shown in each of these edit boxes. Let's start it out with all of them blank. So how would we do that?
Well, that's, again, talking about text. That's the key thing we need to look for here. Text is a property of an edit. So if we scroll down to localizable, there's our text property. And we can simply delete that out. And now we have text starting out as blank.
Very nice.
So we'll just go through real quickly here and blank all of these edits text properties out.
Okay, excellent. All right, so now the next thing we need to do is process. So when we hit process, I want it to take whatever is in that very first text box, the input box, and I want to make it in lowercase and put it in the lowercase edit box.
Okay. So
coding time.
Yep, time for coding. I'll jump straight to the process buttons on click event.
Now before you do that, I know what you were saying. You're going to jump straight to it. I just want to point out that, watch this, there's just a couple ways of doing this. One, we can jump over here to events, and then we can just go over here to on click and double click. Or we could just simply double click on that particular control, and what that's going to do is automatically take us to what would would be the default event.
Yeah, you'll find a lot of controls actually have a default event, such that if you double-click them out here in the visual design area, it'll take whatever the default event is and drop you straight into that,
right,
instead of making you choose one. If you need a different one, of course, you have the Events tab, which lists everything.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and double-click. All right, so here we go. Now you'll notice it automatically put some code in for us. It defined the procedure, and we've got a begin and an end down here. This is something you're going to become very familiar with, but we're not yet really getting into talking about all the syntax. But this is the code that was just added, okay? You'll notice as we scroll up, it didn't put it in some sort of new file or anything. It just added it on to what we've been working with, which we haven't really put anything in there that you guys have seen, but in a minute you'll see. So let's go ahead and do what we got to do.
All right, so this button's job is... well, first, just to work on that first text field, the lowercase text field. So we want to take some text from the first field, do something to it, and put it in another text field.
Right.
So the second text field down should be edit to, because it was the second one we created.
That's correct.
So we can say edit to.
Now he's directly talking to that object. No different if I made a male human in our human factory and called it John, and then I said, hey, John. He's now paying attention to me, so he's talking directly to edit to.
Now, we need to access a property of the edit, because we want to set the text. Text
right.
is a property. To access that, we'll use dot to bring up the list of properties that go with that object.
Okay. Oh, how nice. Look at the little dialogue we get.
And we get a little helper dialog to show us what properties are available. The one I'm interested in is text. You can see as I start to... ext.
Ext.
So there's the text property. I could click it or just finish it off. Now, I want to say that property is equal to some other information.
Ooh, welcome to the wonderful world of Pascal. You know, some of you guys are used to, if you've worked in other scripting languages or programming languages, when you're going to do an assignment, which is what we're doing here, we're assigning something to edit to's text property, right? You would say something like, edit to.text equals. But we're programming in Pascal. So instead of just equals, an assignment is a colon equals.
Precisely. We'll get into the different operators later, but for now the important thing is that the assignment operator in Pascal is a colon equals. So we need to take, what are we putting into edit to's text? Well, we're getting information from edit 1, so you might think we could just say edit1 dot text.
And then, of course, a terminator, and then go and put that 1 out. There you go. Now, the terminator denoting the end of our statement. Now, what I want you to do with just that, first of all, viewer, what do you think this should do? Well, it's an assignment, and what it's saying to do is take whatever's on the right-hand side and put it into what is on the left-hand side. That is all. It's no different than doing something like this. Now, ignore, this isn't code. I'm just trying to give an example.
Pseudocode.
X equals 5. What is X? Logan, what's X?
Well, after you run that, X would be 5.
Right, and if you were in a math class and you wrote up on a board X equals 5 and you looked at your students and said, what's X? Everybody's going to yell out 5. All right, same thing is going on right here. Whatever's on the right-hand side is what is being placed.
So then what is edit to's text? Well, after that, it would be the same thing.
After the button is clicked, it's going to be the same thing as whatever was put in here. Let's run it and find out.
So let's type something so we can see what's going on. Let's type the word cat, press process.
Ooh, cat. Now let's change it to dog. And process. All right. Okay, so now we can go ahead and hit X up there, close out the application. Very good. So now we want it all in lowercase. Man, that sounds tricky to do.
It sounds tricky, but with the help of a simple function, it shouldn't be that hard. We have a function called, or I use the procedure, we'll get into methods later. We have something called lowercase. That takes in some information, in this case, text.
And it is indeed a function because it returns something back.
Right. We're taking in some information, then we're outputting some information to this assignment operator to store it in our other edits text.
You know, right now, this very moment, viewers that are watching this that have no clue about functions or anything like that, they're completely new to programming, you just blew their mind. And right now, some of those viewers are nodding their head yes. They're like, man.
Information comes out of the side of the function?
Right.
That would be a great test question. Information comes out of which side of the function?
But for right now, guys, since, again, we're not diving deep into code, there's just a few things that you're going to have to accept. And that is that Delphi comes with tons of functions already written for you. There's no reason to have to reinvent the wheel every time you want to code. Let's say that, well, the need for putting everything into lowercase when dealing with text is important. Well, if somebody writes that once, why should somebody have to rewrite it every single time that functionality is needed? That would be crazy. So we have a library, if you will, filled with tons of functions just waiting to help us out, and that's what you guys are going to discover. So starting out real simple here is a function that is waiting to help us out. And when you use the function, you have to send it, in this particular case, some information. And that's what we're doing. We are sending this guy this information, all right? He is going to return information back that's going to be placed over here in edit to's text. Let's run it and see what happens.
All right, so now if we type cat and process.
It looks the same, but now what if we type cat with a capital C? Ooh, let's try dog with a capital G.
Okay.
All right, what if we throw spaces in there? So do some crazy stuff. Nice. And what does that give us? Check it out. All right, so lowercase is working beautifully. So now if we wanted to take whatever's in edit 1 and put it in edit 3, which is the uppercase edit box, what would we do?
Well, it would be almost the same as what we've written here, so much so that I'm going to copy this line and paste it and change a few things. Now we're assigning to edit 3, and we're still taking information from edit 1. All of these processing functions are going to be based off of what we type in the first one. He's our master. Mm-hmm. But we want to do something else. We wanted uppercase in the other field. So, along with lowercase, we have an uppercase function.
Okay.
So, well, let's run it and check it out. So now if I type cat and let me do a variation. So, uppercase and lowercase letters. Process, all lowercase, all uppercase.
Nice. This is where we get into the help file, because if I was a viewer of this, right, remember I'm supposed to be being a student. I'm just being a real naughty student by talking too much. How do you know this stuff? How do you know lowercase exists? How do you know uppercase exists? I mean, where do you even start to look?
Well, we have a field left, and let's pretend for a moment that I have no idea how to reverse something. I have no idea how to reverse words.
Okay, that's fair.
So I need to find some function. So let's say I'm getting started to do that. I know we've been doing something like this so far. We're going to be working with edit 3. We're going to be working with edit 1.
Edit 4, though.
Oh, okay, edit. Yes.
Okay.
My bad. So we've got our last edit. We know we're going to be working with the next edit. We've been working with edit 1. We're pretty sure we're going to need a function because we used a function all throughout here. But what function? I mean, nothing visually is giving us any hints or indication of what we can use to do things. So we know what we want to do. We don't know the function that would do it for us. So let's take a look at the help.
The help.
I'm going to go straight to the beginning, Borland help. And
now help can be kind of tricky for a beginner in regards to the help that comes with Delphi, right?
Because, I mean, Delphi is a full IDE, and means it's a very extensive program. And to match that, the help itself is also very extensive.
Very extensive.
So there's a lot of things we could touch on in the help itself. There's the different parts of the help file. A lot of this you'll recognize if you worked with other help systems. We have a contents, an index, and a search. Okay. And the contents will more or less allow us to read the help file as a book. Go through chapters, see subchapters, see examples. Just read from start to end, more or less. The index will allow us to do a really quick title or topic search. And, of course, the search will do a full search where we can find individual words that are located within documents. Gotcha. Now, in order to find a function that might be useful to me, I'm going to use the index, because the index does reference a lot of methods, properties, and so forth. Okay. So, all right, just starting off with what I know. I know I want something that will reverse. So let me type that in. Reverse. Well, let's take a look at what some of these are. I'll click on them, and reverse, that's something to do with graphics, and it's in something called GDI. That doesn't seem to help. It doesn't say anything about reversing a text, word. Yeah. Reverse axis, and we've got, let's see, let's take a look at something else. The scope of this help file. Okay. We were in Delphi, but this help file is relevant to more than Delphi itself. Aha, now let me interject real quick.
This is what I was referring to just a second ago when I said for a beginner when opening the help file. It can be quite confusing because they're going to end up seeing a lot of stuff that they're going to be like, wait a minute, that deals with assembly, or wait, that deals with Win32, or that deals with JScript.
What we're looking right here, that like you just said, this reverse is part of JScript. We're not writing JScript right now. A lot of things in JScript simply won't work. Matter of fact, most of them simply won't work.
Right.
So this isn't helping us. As a matter of fact, it's making our search harder because now we have to weed through. Some things are useful, some things aren't. Now, you can go and tighten the scope of your help search by using the filter. If we drop down the filter, we can see what we can filter by. We can filter by stuff relevant to Developer Studio for .NET, for Win32, and several other things. What we're focusing on here is development for Win32.
Okay.
So if we limit it to that and give it a second to have it reorder this list, you'll see that reverse method by itself is completely gone, which makes sense. We're no longer looking at JavaScript. We're only looking at developer for Win32.
Okay.
And look at the first thing it found, a reverse string routine. Let's load that. Reverse string. All right, now if we look here, location, this is in fact for Delphi for Win32. This is exactly what we need to be looking at.
See, let's look at the description. Well, first of all, returns the reverse of a specified string. I'm reading that up top.
Okay.
Yeah, and then below in the description is reverse string returns the string specified by a text with the characters in reverse order. Ooh.
So that sounds very useful.
Very promising.
So now this is the part where we get excited. Yes, success, we found something.
Now how do we use it?
So, well, I mean, back over in help, it looks like we just use what we've been doing. Use reverse string and feed it edit1. So let's try that. So we'll say reverse string.
Okay.
A little bit of red. Well, what would happen if we try to compile this?
Ooh, errors. Ooh, bad. But I'm typing it right.
Yeah, I know. As a matter of fact, we can prove that it's okay. Well, maybe I mistyped something. Do a direct copy and paste from the help file for reverse string. No.
Aha. Now this is where we're going to get into uses.
Right. What's happening here? The error message that we're getting is undeclared identifier, which is more or less a way of Delphi saying, what is that? I don't know what reverse string is. Right. It hasn't been defined yet.
Now, remember a minute ago when I said that we had kind of like a library filled with functionality, different functions in it? What if we had a whole bunch of libraries, tons of them, and they all had different kinds of functionalities built into all of them? Now, if your program had to reference every single library, that'd be kind of bad, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you would end up with a bunch of code that had nothing to do with your program. You would bring in a library, and its job was to make toast.
Right.
And your application was to draw sheep. And sheep and toast, I mean, there would be no reason to have toast in your sheep world.
I'm not going to ask where sheep came from, but okay. All right, so in this particular case, we can take a look at these libraries we're using, can't we? Right now, the ones that we've already...
And the key there is what you just said, using. Up at the very top of every unit, we have a uses clause.
Aha.
What uses is showing us is what libraries are we using within this unit.
Nice.
You see here we're already using quite a few. You're using Windows, Messages, sysutils, classes, graphics.
Okay, now let's go back to our help real quick. Because how do I know what library that's in?
Unit.
Yeah, well, that was quick.
Is in strutils. So that means we need to use the strutils unit within our unit in order to have access to this reverse string function and all the other functions found in strutils. So to use that, I'll simply append that to our uses clause.
So add a comma, space, and...
Like so, SRT.
Yeah, kind of...
STR.
Yeah,
much better.
All right, so now go back down to the reverse. Oh, it's not...
No longer highlighted. And if we run...
Aha, hey, it ran just fine. Nice.
So we'll do our cat example word. We'll process, and check it out. We have a lowercase, uppercase, and a reverse, an exact copy of our text reversed.
Ooh, fancy, fancy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I know as you are watching us do this, you are probably thinking, uses, libraries, what the, oh, it's so confusing, functions, methods. Don't worry. While we are going to throw these fancy words around, I promise you guys we're going to continue to slowly introduce you to this information. We're not expecting you to walk away with anything from this video, with the exception of everything that you work with inside of Delphi is an object. Okay, everything you work visually with is an object. An object has a name. An object has properties. An object has events. Basically, when something happens to that object, what's going to take place. And then an object has methods, built-in functionality, and these are things we'll look at a little bit more later on. Then we've talked about these libraries, if you will, that we can get information out of. But you don't even think about that right now. Just in copying this application, make sure you put that string utils or str utils up in the uses section. Very, very important. So, yeah, that's really all I wanted you to get out of that. Now, we're not done yet. We are right at an hour. So, this is a doozy video when I was only expecting each episode to be 15 to 20 minutes long. So you guys are getting an extra special one today because I want to do a little bit more, if you don't mind, Logan.
All right, yeah, I'm up for it.
Okay, cool. This is just too much fun. Let's go ahead and close that. And actually run it one more time. Give me a sentence with all sorts of crazy capitalization in it.
This is a sentence.
And some numbers.
3, 4, cat again.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, not a whole book. Just kidding. All right, process. All right, check it out. Check it out. Obviously, it didn't capitalize or uncapitalize the numbers because you can't do that. They're not letters. And then down there below, the reverse, it did indeed reverse our numbers as well. So it worked beautifully. The whole application is working exactly like I requested it to at the very beginning when I laid the design spec out for Logan. So let's go ahead and close the application. And you guys, there's the code. That's it right there. Simple enough. And remember, up at the top, we added in the uses at the very end, string utils or str utils. All right, let's make one more thing. Let's make something for fun as we wrap this all up. So let's go ahead and do file and a new project, or wherever you want to make your new project from. Okay, so we don't need to save any of this. All right, make that window just a little bit bigger. We're going to make just a fun little chase me program just so that they can see something a little different. I want you to make a button, and we're going to do something. All right, we're going to do something a little different here. The caption of the button. Let's have it say, catch me. Okay, good. Now, here's how I want this to work. As the mouse moves over the button, I want the button to randomly appear somewhere else on that form.
So we're talking about what will look like a moving object.
That's right. I want it to look like a moving object. So, I want it to move. So let's go ahead and show them how we would do that.
Okay, now, like you were saying, you wanted it to respond to the mouse. So if you're moving the mouse outside of it, nothing happens. If you try to touch it with the mouse, then it runs away.
That's right.
So that means we can't really rely on click, otherwise it'll just stay there until we click it.
Right.
Instead, we need, and of course, click is what's going to happen if we double click on it right here. We need something else. So we'll go to the Events tab, we'll go down to Input, and we have On Mouse Enter. This is as soon as the mouse, position-wise, enters the area of that button.
So many types of events available for us already. How cool is that?
So we'll double-click on Mouse Enter, and let's see, what do we want to have happen? We want the button to move somewhere else. Now, I know move might sound kind of complicated, like, wait, we're getting into stuff moving, animation, things moving around on the screen. Really? We don't have to go anywhere outside of the world of properties.
Check this out. Just to kind of what you're saying, we don't have to go outside the world of properties. We select our button, and we'll come over here to properties. And with that, if we just kind of scroll on down over here to the layout, look at this. Left is currently 176. Let's move it over. Ooh, it's now 136. Move it over some more. Ooh, it's now 88. Well, what if I just hand type in 28? Enter. Ooh, it's now over there. And top. So top is currently 168. What if it was 70? Ooh, it's moved there too. So there's two properties that we can affect here, left and top. And that will change its location on the form.
So we can, in fact, move it around with properties.
Okay.
So when the mouse enters, we know we want to set the left. That's one of the properties we need to set. So we'll say button1.left is equal to, now we want to have it, where do we want it to appear?
We want to randomize where it's going to appear. How do I find randomize? Go back to that help. I know what we're going to do.
So let's see. To randomize, we'll do randomize. Could that
randomize
possibly?
Routine?
Initializes the random number generator.
Ooh, it sounds interesting, but we don't want to initialize. That's something we can look at later.
Also, it doesn't seem to return anything because we need to get something back. We need a random number to use.
So we need our...
This isn't giving us a number.
Aha, meaning that's a procedure. A function will give us something back.
Exactly. So let's take this down a little bit. If we take it back to
look for random,
we have a random function.
Ooh, what do you know?
And let me constrain the search. We've gone back to searching through stuff like Visual Basic. Random routine. There we go. Inside of Delphi,
yep.
We have a random routine, generates random numbers within a given range. So not only are we returning a number, we're taking in a range. So we know we can't just ask for any random number, which wouldn't help us too much because what if we had a number that's outside
5 million.
Yeah, outside of the form, and then the number just vanishes into space.
Your button would go bye-bye.
All right, so we know we have a random routine.
And again, remember this routine is a function because it returns information. And a minute ago when Logan looked at randomize, it was a procedure. It did not return anything. Instead, it initialized the random state, which we'll talk about in a minute.
So we know we can use random to generate a random number.
Notice how it's not underlined in red. Open that help up real quick down from the bottom again, just so I can point this out. The unit that it uses is system. So you see right there by the mouse. Let's go ahead and minimize help and come up to uses in our code. And system is?
System, if not listed here, is used because system is intrinsic to all programs in Delphi. It is, you can't not use system. It
correct.
It is one, you could say that it is one with the very core of Pascal.
Yeah.
It is part of the base.
I wanted them to see that since we already pushed uses in case someone's trying to use what we showed them a second ago and they go, wait a minute,
they're stepping ahead and saying, okay, let me type in system.
Right.
In this case, system just goes along with any Delphi program.
All right, so we're back down to random.
So random, we know from looking at the help, we know that we're going to have to feed it something. We're going to have to feed it a range.
Okay.
So what range are we looking at here? If we look at the form, you see we have, let's see where it starts. If we move the button all the way to the left, well, it's going to be hard with it wanting to jump, but if I set the left to 0, now we're synced up exactly to that side. So we know we want to go from 0 to something.
Okay.
What do we want to go up to? Well, the other side of the form. So we have out to about 440 or so.
Okay.
So we know that that's the range. The range is, let's look at the form. I'm trying to think of some way of keeping it so we don't have to type in numbers directly.
How about the width of the form? Is that a property?
So we're looking at the form itself. We do have width. We were looking at roughly 400 before, and that's correct, about 488.
Okay.
So under code, we can use the width of the form as our range. So let's say form1.width. Like so.
Okay. So that returns us, in this particular case, from 0 to whatever the width is currently set at. So if we were to resize the form while we're running the application, the button's still going to move along properly.
Right. The button's going to keep up with it. If we make it smaller, then we have a smaller range in which the button can move.
All right. Let's try it out.
So we have our button. Now we mouse over.
Oh, it moved a little
bit.
Moved a little bit more. Whoa.
And then it jumped to the other side of the screen. So.
But, of course, right now he's only dealing with the left of it, so it's only going to move left and right.
And one thing I want to point out before we get too much farther is you see it's starting to edge off the edge of the screen.
Right.
And that's something to look at. You might wonder why, because, I mean, theoretically...
Ooh, there you go.
We're looking at... So here's what's happening. The property we're using is the left of this button, and there's the left side of the button. That means with our given range, that left can go from all the way from here to the very edge. That means the button could go...
Even further off screen.
1 pixel off the screen completely.
Right.
So
or have only 1 pixel on the screen, yeah.
Yeah, precisely. So that means we need to have a little bit less than the entire width of the form. Well, how much less?
Okay.
You could say the amount, or how much you want to take off is the width of the button. That way you'll always be able to keep the width of the button on the screen at all times, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely.
So that means we can say that this range is a little bit too wide.
So we need to subtract.
We need to lessen it by the width of the button. So we can say button1.width. So form1.width minus the button's width. So if we run that now, as we move it, no matter what we do, it doesn't jump off the page.
Very nice. All right, so now let's go ahead and make it jump all around. So now we need to account for the top.
And to save a little bit of time, I'll just copy that line and paste it and change the relevant properties. So the button 1 property we're dealing with now is top, so we can adjust where it appears vertically.
Okay.
And that range needs to be based on the height of the form rather than the width.
Which is another
otherwise
property
we'll have,
it has.
Yeah, otherwise we'll have a bad range. So we want the form's height minus the button's height. So it's just like with the left thing. We want to keep the entire button within the form, not just the top pixel.
Okay.
So form 1's height minus button 1's height. And there we go. Now we spend all of our time chasing this button all over the form.
Very nice. Oh, we went down a little bit too far there.
And yeah, there is a reason for that, though.
It happened because of the caption bar at the top?
Yeah, because of the title bar.
Title bar.
It's looking at the form as the very top of the form to the very bottom of the form, and so the button is moving a little bit too far down because the button 0, let me jump into design to show this for a second. The button, let's say the button was at 0. Where does it think 0 is?
In regards to top.
So if we go down to visual and then top 0, it thinks 0 is here. So the button 0 starts here. The form 0 starts up here. So
right.
It could be that much offset.
Exactly. So you just need to account for that. All right, so and we won't worry about doing that. I think they have the idea. So they can subtract one more thing from it. All right, so really that puts us at about 1 hour and 10 minutes, which is way longer than I had planned on us going. I hope that you are getting a lot of information out of these free video training modules on the Delphi Training Series. And we will be back again tomorrow and push it yet further. And the idea is the further and further we go with this, we'll slowly be able to get into more interesting things and start developing more complex applications. Now, we are putting these videos over at YouTube, and from YouTube we will give you a link to the high-res version so that you can grab this. All we ask is that, we get some excitement from our viewers, and we'll keep producing these for you. But that's the key thing. If nobody's really interested and we don't have the excitement, then we will spend our time on other things. And if we generate enough excitement, not only will you guys get a lot of these, we'll start producing some other content as well and start putting that stuff out. So we want to thank you guys for your support and for visiting us over at 3dbuzz.com as well. And we will see you guys again tomorrow with episode 3. Thanks a lot.